First, I appreciate, Joe and Lori, I appreciate the invitation to be here, and it's always good to be at the Institute. I enjoyed working with the Institute when I was Lieutenant Governor and Governor, and feel good about what you do here. And I always felt particularly impressed when I was Governor working in Danville by a number of things, initiative and problem-solving attitude, but as I've said to a number of you, I'm a little bit of a student of regional cooperation because I was a mayor, and I was mayor in Richmond, and we had our own issues and trying to work together and cooperate with Henrico and Chesterfield. And regional cooperation is never just automatic or completely smooth, but I always felt when I was here at the Institute or when I was doing events with the Chamber or when I was here to talk about workforce development, I always felt like the degree of regional effort working together was strong here, and that's very important, not to be taken for granted, and so I applaud you for that. What I would like to do is talk to you a little bit about what I think, big picture, how the economy's looking, what I think are our potential strong spots, but also what are still some hurdles that we have to get over. Because everything that we might want to do in Danville or anywhere in Virginia is going to be affected by how vigorous our economic climate will be. And I'd like to talk about that from the vantage point of being on the Budget Committee in Congress. And then I would like to talk about, given that, what I see are some opportunities and challenges. And then third, I'd love to take some questions. But I will say, again, how good it is to be in Danville. My first trip as governor outside the governor's office was to Danville about 3 days after I was inaugurated. My first trip as United States Senator outside of the Senate was to Danville about 10 days after I came into the Senate. And I intend to keep doing that. I've got a Danville office. Chris Collins, who's with me, staffs my Danville office and does a very, very good job. Because this is a critical and important part of the state. And I don't want to be one of these people that just, live in Richmond and just spend my time on the 95 miles between Richmond and D.C. And that's why I have an office here, and that's why I was so happy to have a chance to come here. And I also learned one of my best lessons in economic development here in Danville very, very early in my time as governor. Some of you have heard me tell the story, but I want to tell it again. Because sometimes the lessons you learn, they stick with you. And then maybe the older you get, the harder it is to change your mind about the lessons you learn. You kind of tend to stick on lessons, and one of the best ones I learned was early in my time as governor here. And it had to deal with the company Essel Propac. When you talk about issues of globalism and global trade, it's natural in Danville or Martinsville or a whole lot of places in Virginia and a whole lot of places in this country to think about what we lose with globalism, what jobs might have gone, what manufacturing opportunities might have left. And that's a natural thing. And there is a reality to that. That we have to grapple with. And as we're talking about new free trade agreements in Congress right now, we've got to look back and look at what happened when NAFTA was passed in sense and analyze what was good and what was bad. So there is a reality to that. But I remember early in my time as governor when I was asked to come down and work on this Essel Propac expansion. And when I pulled up, I just was very, very struck that the story basically was Indian venture capitalists purchasing an English company, telling the English company, we want to have a North American manufacturing facility. That English company deciding, okay, we're going to come to North America, and deciding if we want to manufacture and manufacture well, we're going to find exactly the right community to do it, and deciding that Danville was that community. And then hiring a Spaniard to be the manager of the plant. And I remember driving up that day for the announcement and thinking about this, sort of Indian venture capitalist, an English company, buying a plant in Danville, hiring a Spaniard to be the plant manager. And I think the flags of all the countries were up that day that I pulled up. And it just taught me something about the world we live in, that like it or not, whatever we say about it, it's all global. It is all global. But it also taught me something about the global economy, which is we don't have to stand back and worry about what we'll lose. We can also be aggressive and go out and battle for what we'll gain. And that pattern has been repeated here with Swedwood and Com40 and others. This is a place that others look at and say, there's a high quality workforce, there's a high quality of life, that geographically we're well situated within massive percentages of the American population, this is a community that has something to offer. And not just to offer to a company that might be headquartered next door, but even to entrepreneurs or business folks from around the world. And that should make you feel good. It taught me something about the nature of the modern economy, both challenges but also opportunities. And the main lesson I learned from that was be aggressive. The global economy, whether you like it or not, that's where we are, and you're going to more likely succeed if you're out there aggressively battling. And Virginia is really well positioned, and so is Southern Virginia, is very well positioned if we put our resources kind of together in the right way, kind of putting the loaves in the basket. If we all do that, then we can really succeed. So that was an important lesson to learn. Economically, when I was elected to the Senate, one of the things they tell you, you make a pitch about being on committees. And this is an experience that we're very familiar with. And one of the things they tell you in the Senate is when you ask to be on committees, you will get something you like, you will get something you don't like, and you will not get something that you want. And all that proved to be true. The thing that I got that I didn't ask for and I didn't want was to be on the Budget Committee. Now you might ask, why would you want to be on the Budget Committee? That's a great committee. Well, because when I got elected to the Senate, there hadn't been a budget done in 4 years. And I'm not there for my health. And, I don't want to just be on a committee so it looks good on a piece of stationery. I'd like to be on a committee that actually works. Budgets are critically important. As a mayor, as a governor, they're hard. They can cause you to age prematurely, but they are how you make policy, and you're more likely to do right or wrong in the way you do a budget than virtually anything else you do. But I didn't want to be on a committee that wasn't doing budgets. Well, I got put on the committee anyway. And I started to agitate from the moment I got put on, we have to start doing budgets again in the United States Senate and in Congress. The Senate hadn't done a budget in 4 years, and there hadn't been a budget conference. The two houses coming together on a budget deal in a divided Congress since 1986. So when both houses are Democrat or both houses are Republican, there would be a conference deal. But in a divided Congress, there hadn't been a budget conference since 1986. Well, battled very, very hard. It took a long time, got a budget passed in March. Then it was hard to get it into conference, and that ultimately led to the shutdown of government, which was completely foolish and a self-inflicted wound. We got a budget deal in the middle of December, and then last week we passed an appropriations bill. Instead of sequester and continuing resolutions and super committees and every gimmick known to man, instead of doing budgets the normal way, we've done a 2-year budget and then an appropriations bill to match the first year of that 2 years. Right after we passed the budget deal, I ran into Christine Lagarde, who is the president of the International Monetary Fund, monitoring global economic trends. And I asked her, Madam President, tell me what this budget deal will do for the U.S. economy and the global economy. And she said to me, this is going to be very good for the United States, and it's going to be very good for the world if you don't mess it up in the next 90 days by fooling around with the debt ceiling. But she said certainty is good. Out here in this room, we have folks from government, we have folks from chamber and other organizations, we have folks in the private sector, and you all know this. We can deal with certainty. We'd like certainty that's in good times, but even in tough times, give us certainty, and then we'll figure out a way to adjust and be resilient. But uncertainty is economically very damaging. It's like an ankle weight around the economy. And the absence of budgets and the absence of sort of fiscal stewardship has imposed a high uncertainty cost. But doing the budget and starting to see deficits come down, and the budget wasn't everything we would want it to be. I'm not going to oversell the budget that we did. There were some big picture items around deficit reduction or infrastructure investments that were not in the budget. This budget was a compromise. There were things in the compromise I liked, and there were things I didn't like, and there were things I wished had been in that weren't in, like other compromises. But to give certainty for 2 years is a very positive thing. We already see some economic trends starting to pick up in terms of consumer confidence and auto sales and housing and the stock market. But there has still been uncertainty, and I think there's going to be uncertainty until we get over the next hurdle, which is, do we fool around with the debt ceiling again? Fooling around with the debt ceiling, which is essentially Congress saying, despite the fact that we've passed a budget and made financial commitments, we are not willing to stand by the commitments we've already made, would be economically very destructive. And when Congress has twice sort of flirted with that deadline, we've created a lot of uncertainty and challenges. And the next deadline that we have to tackle in terms of the debt ceiling is going to come sort of end of February, early March. And so the ability of this two-year budget deal to really provide the certainty that's going to help the economy globally and nationally is still dependent upon us getting that piece right. But I think lessons were learned because of the shutdown, and lessons were learned because of flirting around with the debt ceiling. Now, I'm an eternal optimist, and I haven't been there that long, so sometimes I'm more optimistic than evidence would suggest I ought to be, but I do feel like optimism sometimes helps you get to the right results, so I'm going to keep being an optimist. But we have, over the course of the next month, the need to reach a deal on the debt ceiling, to make plain to the global financial community that the United States stands behind its fiscal obligations. But I believe if we do, and I don't mind saying this in front of press, I think the national economic trends are going to be quite positive in this country for the next significant chunk of time. I really do believe that. We have to get over that burden, but if we do, the certainty that we will have provided, I think we're going to start to see some real lift. We're going to start to see real lift nationally, and I think Virginia will see it in a significant way because of a variety of features, many of which none of us can take credit for. We have great geography in Virginia. We're near great population centers. We have one of the most active ports on the East Coast, the second most active port after New York. We have an international airport at Dulles. Most states would love a port, or they would love an international airport, and they have neither. We've got both. And while they may not be next door, the presence of an international airport and the presence of an active port, I can tell from the businesses that chose to locate here when I was governor, those are not minor factors. They're important factors. The ability to find new clients and use a port or use an airport to reach out to them, an international airport to reach out to them. So I think Virginia is going to be relatively well off. We're one of 10 states in the country that's bottom 10 unemployment and top 10 median income. But now let's get to the reason we're here. You've spent all day long talking about economic development, not generally, economic development, not just in Virginia, but economic development in the Danville area. And we all know that averages can be deceiving. So state unemployment averages or test scores or whatever, averages can be deceiving. Economies are really regional. The state lines actually matter less than region. And this is an area that's had economic challenges because of the transition of one industry to other industries. And there's still, a sense of transition and looking for new opportunities and new exciting opportunities that will make this region all that it can be economically. And so I know a little bit about the agenda that you've been tackling today. And let me just jump right into it. I do believe, and frankly, this was the subject of the first meeting I had in Danville when I was governor, and I sat in a room upstairs. It continues to be workforce is king. I really believe that. That first meeting I had in January of 2006 here was about workforce. The meeting that I had when I came down as senator in early 2013 was about workforce. And if a senator comes here in 25 years and has a meeting about the economy, that senator will be talking about workforce. The reason that I think that will be a permanent is we are now in a position where talent is the most precious asset in the world. It's not water. It's not oil. As important as energy is, talent is the most precious asset in the world. And the cities and regions and states and countries that know how to find talent and nurture it and grow it and reward it and celebrate it and attract it, those are the communities that are going to be successful. And we have to have the right talent strategies, and that depends on smart state policy. It depends on federal policy that sets good goals but doesn't get in the way with too much paperwork. But it also requires a lot of diligence at the local level. It probably also requires some different definitions of what educational success is. A passion of mine is career and technical education. And I know that that's a passion that's shared by many people in the room. For a long time in American education, career and technical education was devalued. I grew up in a house where my dad ran a welding and ironworking shop, and I ran a school that taught kids to be carpenters and welders in Honduras for a year. And I became very passionate early in my life about career and technical skills. But for a long time in American education, vocational education kind of became, frankly, considered to be kind of the second-class education. For no reason. It's not that way anywhere else in the world. Other places in the world, career and technical education is so valued, but we sort of let that become lesser valued in American K-12 education. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's roaring back with a vengeance in Virginia and elsewhere, the importance of career and technical education. I'll tell you a little story, though. We still have a ways to go policy-wise at the national level. The Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, was before the Budget Committee recently talking about budgets and talking about education in this country. And he was given the statistic that you hear a lot, that Americans who get higher education, we used to have be number one in the world in the percentage of adults with a higher ed degree, and now we're 16 or 17 in the world. And I asked him this question. I said, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to ask you this. I don't know whether what I'm asking you is a terminology problem or a policy problem, and it may be both. He said, fire away. I said, you tell me we're falling in terms of the percentage of folks who don't have a higher ed degree after high school. Somebody graduates from high school, and they get accepted into the Newport News Shipbuilding Apprenticeship Program in Newport News, which is one of the best career and technical education programs in this country, and graduates from that school will immediately make more money than 95% of college graduates. If somebody goes from high school to that shipbuilding apprenticeship program and they finish their degree, is that person counted as an adult with a higher ed degree or not? And he said, you know what, I don't think so. And I said, then we got a terminology problem and a policy problem. We're still not valuing high-quality career and technical education in the way that we should as a nation. And I just used the Newport News Shipbuilding Program as an example. There are many other examples of it. So one of the issues that I'm working on, and I would love to work on this together with leaders in the region, is I tried to get on the Health, Education, Labor, Pension Committee, and I didn't get on. That was the one I wanted to be on that I didn't get on. But I surveyed around when I got to the Senate, and I discovered there's nobody in the Senate out of 100 who's taken on career and technical education as a particular passion. You know, early childhood, there's advocates, including me. Higher ed affordability, there's advocates, including me. But there's nobody who's making career and technical education their personal mission. And so I'm making that one my personal mission. And I'm working now with colleagues and stakeholders outside the Capitol to look at innovative ways to do more career and technical education, both within our K-12 systems, also within our community colleges, and Danville Community College has some excellent programs in this way. But we got to make it this kind of respected and important part of the American spectrum of public education again. And that's something that will continue to be, as you think about as a chamber, as you know, local governments, as regional businesses, where to put energy and investment. That is a huge and important place. Because you know how manufacturing is different today. You know, manufacturing, the people who talk about the death of American manufacturing, they're wrong. There's interesting, innovative, challenging manufacturing going on in the United States, but it's different. I walk into welding shops that are very much like my dad's shop where I grew up working, but instead of people operating equipment, there are people programming equipment to operate. The same operations are being done, but they're being done in a very different way. And it requires more technical training, or different kinds of, a better way to say it is different kinds of technical training to do the same kind of work in the welding shop or the manufacturing facility of today. And we're used to the other phenomenon. Manufacturing facilities that produce the output that was produced by a facility 10 years ago will often do them with a third of the people because of the mechanization and the machinery and the investments. And we might wish that were otherwise, but it's not. We've just got to make sure that it's our people that are doing those jobs by making sure our people are trained to do them. So if there's one thing that I would hope to do most as a senator in kind of this partnership at a new level with Danville, it would be to work with you on innovative workforce training and career and technical education issues. And there isn't any reason with the work ethic in this community that this community can't be a leader in that area. The second area that's really important is health and healthcare. I was talking to the hospital leadership, Eric, earlier today, and you know the hospital is the largest private sector employer in the region. And if you add together the number of employees here, the number of employees at the hospital in Martinsville, kind of operated and managed together, 2,000 people. It is a sizable employer. Health and healthcare is a major driver of this community, and people come to this community because of your healthcare assets. And we got, Lord knows, we spend a lot of time talking about healthcare in Washington, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we ought to. But one thing we ought to be talking about always before we talk about healthcare is health. And I think that as a nation, and as a community in Richmond where I live, and I would suspect that it's the same here, we have tried to build a system of health care, managing illness rather than the promotion of health, and paying for procedures, and we get the best and we get the most, rather than paying for health and outcomes. And so there is a big need in this country, and one of the leaders of it right now is, a local Southern Virginia lady, Marilyn Tavener, many of you know, who's in charge of Medicaid and Medicare, trying to migrate a system that was about procedures to a system that's about health. Because more health means saving money, and more health means more productivity, and more health means more happiness. And so health issues are also really important issues for a community and for chambers and for others to tackle. What are novel ways for better health, better nutrition, better exercise? What are design standards that you can do as a city to promote more activity and more walking? These are things that we have to grapple with. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll take questions, is we have to continue to be about infrastructure investments. Now, the mayor gave me credit for the Robertson Bridge, and I get zero credit except for one thing. The Robertson Bridge was funding that Congress provided through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And I wasn't in Congress when they did that, so I get zero credit for that. But what I do get credit for was those dollars came to Virginia, and I got to decide how to allocate them. So if the money's not yours, getting to decide how to allocate them is a nice thing. And this was a very important project for this community, for traffic and for other reasons. But infrastructure investments continue to be really important. Transportation, broadband, these investments that create jobs today. That's the great thing about infrastructure. Create a job today, but there's a lot of things we can spend money on today that, then it's not around for us tomorrow. But infrastructure investments, you spend the money today, and then you raise your platform for economic success for generations. And certainly in the former tobacco growing regions of the state, like Danville, the Tobacco Commission investments and things like broadband, those will produce benefit for a long time to come, just like other infrastructure investments will. I give huge praise to the General Assembly for doing the transportation package last year. I know it was hard. I know there are aspects of it and elements of it that aren't popular. But fundamentally, that was a vote for, we want to make investments that our kids and our grandkids can still be relying on and using. And anytime you cast a vote for that next generation or two and for their economic opportunities, I think that's something to be applauded. We have the same task at the federal level, because federal transportation and infrastructure funding tends to be kind of patched up. It's like a bad patch job on a pothole. We end up with a big pothole in the funding sources, and we just put just enough in maybe to get us for 6 months or 9 months. We haven't really tackled infrastructure in a way that we should. There continue to be infrastructure projects in this region that could be critically important and where we could be helpful, and I hope that we can tackle those at the federal level to frankly learn off the state's example and then supplement what the state has done to do more investments. Now, I'll just conclude and just say one thing, and then I'd love to open it up. And this is just like a status report. I'm very happy to be in the Senate. You meet a lot of people in the Senate who are not happy, who spend a lot of time grumbling, because frankly there's a lot of babbling and griping, and there's a lot of instances of people not working together. The shutdown for 16 days, the government of the greatest nation on earth, was not operating. How foolish. And that can be frustrating. And there are frustrations every day, no doubt about it. However, I do believe the economy, if we get over this debt ceiling situation, is about to see some real lift. And I think that lift will be experienced by Virginians, and I think that lift will be experienced here. And it's a lot easier to do good things if you feel some lift than if you're feeling drag. If you feel some lift, it's easier to do some good things together. So I look forward to partnering on especially the workforce matters, which I'm going to make a particular passion of during however long I happen to be in the Senate. And I appreciate your invitation to come back to Danville.